Now that the dust has settled in the European elections, when compared to the far-right pivot in Germany, France, Austria, Italy, and the Netherlands, election results in Central and Eastern Europe look rather commendable. In Hungary, Viktor Orban's Fidesz and other partners had their worst performance in almost 20 years. In Slovakia, progressive Slovakia edged out over Prime Minister Robert Fico's pro-Russian Smer party. And in Poland, the Civic Coalition gained one more seat than their bitter rival, Law and Justice. Now here to discuss these results is Daniel Hegedüs, Senior Fellow at GMF. Hello and welcome to the program today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, based on the results that we've seen here in Central and Eastern Europe, for you, what was some of the most surprising?
I can only agree with you that we see qualitatively very different electoral developments than in key Western European countries. And it is especially true for the cases of Hungary and Slovakia, where there was a keen electoral pushback against illiberal government policies. And this pushback actually came from the political center, from the center-right in Hungary. And actually that was represented by absolutely fresh and new protest movement, which barely existed 4 months ago. And it was able actually to conquer 30% of the support of Hungarian voters. It actually wiped out the existing opposition, which was largely unable to challenge the rule of Prime Minister Orban over the past 14 years. And although I think it remained far beyond the level that actually it could pose a threat to the stability of the Orban regime, it obviously made clear which party will be the main challenger of Fidesz at the 2026 national elections.
Now, many people are praising newcomer Péter Magyar, but is he really a blessing for Europe? What are some of his main political differences from that of Viktor Orban?
Yes, actually, we are talking about a new political player and a new party. And their positions over the past 4 months were rather unclear in many areas. The main topic was anti-corruption, and that was actually the charging point and the main point of criticism against the Orban regime, while in other areas, and especially when it came to foreign policy and the relationship to the European Union, actually the talking points of Péter Magyar resembled very much the discourse of Fidesz. They started to change, and actually not independently from the perspectives of the Respect and Freedom Party to join the European People's Party. And with their formerly also very much Ukraine critical and in many respects even pro-Russian positions, it's obvious that they couldn't enter EPP. And what we saw over the past couple of days, and especially during the last big demonstration 1 day before the EP election, was that Péter Magyar actually started changing talking points and represent a true pro-European alternative at the Hungarian political scene.
So somewhat conflicted. Well, our correspondent over there in Budapest for the elections, he sat down and spoke with Péter Magyar. Let's go ahead and see if we can pull that up and take a listen to what he had to say.
Viktor Orban, during this campaign, was talking a lot about peace, about Ukraine.
About war, not about peace, just about war. He has now a superpower to tell 62 times in a sentence the war. So it's crazy.
Yeah, but what I really want to know is your opinion about Ukraine. If you were the Prime Minister today, would you send military aid to Kyiv?
No, this is my personal opinion. You should know that we have at least 100,000 Hungarian people living in the Ukraine, a big minority in the Ukraine. They have several problems concerning fundamental rights, language rights, education rights. So, and this region of the Ukraine was not attacked, luckily, until now by Russia. And we don't want to risk their life, these at least 100,000 Hungarian people living there.
Okay, so after hearing that, I think most people around Europe, especially who are rallied around the point of Ukraine, are probably disenfranchised when it comes to Peter Magyar's stance as far as that goes. It really doesn't make him that much different than Viktor Orban. Is this going to be a problem for Peter Magyar, you think, going forward? And why is it exactly? Are Hungarians convinced that this is the West's fault, this war in Ukraine? Why no support for Ukraine?
Yes, I think one cannot forget that we are talking about a country which experienced 14 years of autocratization. And this 14 years of autocratization was dominated by an everywhere existent and dominating level of state propaganda, which is built on internal domestic disinformation. So Hungarian public media and Fidesz-controlled private media are the main sources of disinformation in the Hungarian media space. And this turned actually not only a large part of the Hungarian society, but also the previously most anti-Russian electorate in the country, which was the electoral base of Fidesz, into a pro-Russian one, actually over the past 10 years. We cannot forget these developments. I think Peter Magyar's presence make a difference. Obviously, I'm also very critical with his position on Russia and Ukraine. But if we take a look on the track record of the Orban government over the past 2 years, which was actually characterized by continuous blocking of the financial and military aid from the side of the European Union to Ukraine, was characterized by the watering down of sanction packages to Russia, then I think it will be a qualitative difference if a potentially new Hungarian government is not taking every opportunity actually to undermine the collective EU and NATO efforts in the face of the largest security challenge Europe is facing over the past couple of years. So I think what we saw in the case of Peter Magyar's position on Ukraine and Russia is obviously mainly for a domestic consumption. He is potentially fearing what could be the electoral result of a change in the foreign policy narrative, but I am pretty much confident that actually the ongoing negotiations with Manfred Weber will actively shape Peter Magyar's position in the foreign policy area, and especially when it comes to the European integration. I think that won't be a U-turn, and he won't be hawkish on Russia and Ukraine, but actually having a capable political alternative in Hungary that might be able to effectively challenge Prime Minister Viktor Orban in 2 years at the national election, I think it's a huge step forward in the direction that the lifespan of this illiberal regime within the European Union potentially also can have an end date.
And perhaps small baby steps can be a way to affect change there in Ukraine. Well, now back to his TISA party in the European Parliament. You mentioned EPP may be a problem for them to join due to their potentially pro-Russian rhetoric. So what bloc do they join? Which parties do they adhere to? The TISA, these new members, 30% of which were voted into European Parliament.
Yes, TISA doesn't have any European party political affiliation yet. Their clear target is the European People's Party, and I think there is mutual strategic interest in actually succeeding with that deal. From the side of the European People's Party, since Fidesz left, it's actually a very uncomfortable position and very much also conflicting with the self-understanding of the European People's Party that they don't have a proper member party from Hungary. The Fidesz satellite party, Christian Democratic People's Party, is officially a member, and it has had one representative in the European Parliament as well. But I think the questions whether it's really an independent and autonomous party and not only a proxy of Fidesz are pretty much legitimate. I don't think that the representatives of the Christian Democratic People's Party from Hungary would be in the political situation to veto the accession of the TISA party. And against that background, I expect that that this accession procedure will be actually concluded pretty fast in the coming weeks and months, and especially because with 7 MEPs, that could be also a pretty valuable contribution to the European People's Party. And I don't have any doubts about their loyalty in supporting Ursula von der Leyen for a second term as European Commission President. And that would make them actually in the current political constellation, when actually a couple of EPP member parties are rebelling against von der Leyen, very, very valuable.
Well, now changing our direction or shifting our focus over to Slovakia, Prime Minister Fico's party lost by 1 seat to Progressive Slovakia, despite his baseless claims that his assassination attempt was due to the opposition and the political polarization, if you will. And he did that just before the election. Now, what does this say about the political climate in Slovakia? That indeed that had little or no effect on the actual results, and in fact, Progressive Slovakia won the majority there.
Yes, actually, I think we can argue that it was not, despite the baseless, due to the baseless claims of Prime Minister Fico, in which actually he made the political opposition and free media and civil society politically responsible for the assassination attempt against him, which mobilized actually the progressive and centrist voters in the country who wanted to clearly send a message to the governing party that this is not the way how they wish Slovak politics to go in the next couple of months. I think on the one hand, we can do the conclusion that it was a clear protest vote against Smer, just actually a couple of months after the national parliamentary elections and the presidential elections, which were dominated by the political alliance of Smer and the other social democratic party of Peter Pellegrini called Hlas. And now this time the tide was turned. However, I would be also very cautious to draw far-reaching consequences. It was still a second-tier election, and we know that in Slovakia, traditionally, actually, the electoral turnout at the European parliamentary elections is the lowest in the whole European Union. Mm-hmm. This time it was a record turnout. The record turnout was 35%. So a large part of the Slovak electorate, which potentially does not share this very critical approach towards the illiberal rule of Robert Fico, and does not fear domestic development in the country, which can be reminiscent to previous developments in Hungary or developments in Poland between 2015 and 2023. So they, in large numbers, did not participate in this electoral exercise, did not cast their ballots, so we don't see their political opinion reflected by this electoral result. However, I think aside of Progressive Slovakia, which was able to mobilize, we also see that another party which was very effective in bringing their core electorate to the ballot boxes in Slovakia was actually the radical right party, Republika, which came at the 3rd place in this electoral contest.
Now, very briefly, we're just about out of time, but today there are mass protests by public television workers in Bratislava. Fico is planning a takeover of the public media due to it being previously unfavorable to him. Now, will this put the Slovakian government at odds with the European Union, especially in light of the European Freedom of Media Act, which entered into force on May 7th?
The European Media and Freedom Act indeed entered force, but will not be applied until the second part of 2025. So against that background, unfortunately, this piece of European legislation is not necessarily helpful in shaping the current developments in Bratislava with regard to the potential takeover of, or potential with regard to the de facto takeover of the Slovak public broadcasting. However, information are available that actually the European Commission is closely following the liberal developments in the country. And actually, in light of the experiences made with Hungary over the past 2 years, when the European Commission was really ready to play hardball with the Hungarian government, I think we can expect that the EU will try not to make the same failure as was the case previously with Hungary, that they respond too late. So most likely, we can expect infringement procedures launched by the European Commission in due time after actually these legal moves in Slovakia will enter into force. It's a good question, however, how the new composition of the European Parliament actually can influence the enforcement of EU values and EU law in the member states, because the two previous champions of rule of law enforcement, the Greens and the European Liberals, actually very seriously plummeted in their support. Their influence may also weaken over the European Commission, and the more right-leaning European Parliament will be also much less pushy with the European Commission to play hardball with the liberal governments. And against that background, I think it's an open puzzle. The lessons learned are obviously there, which were made with Hungary and Poland. The question is whether in the new political climate, the European Commission will be able to act properly and according to the previous lessons learned.
So time will tell. We'll let the dust settle a little bit. Daniel Hegedüs, Senior Fellow at GMF, thank you very much for your insight and joining us here on TVP World.
Thank you for having me.
And that concludes this edition. That was Daniel Hegedüs, Senior Fellow at GMF, and we thank you for watching, and we'll see you in some time. Please stay with us on TVP World.